we've been looking at the stories of the path. We've been looking at the path of Buddhism in terms of the 5 aspects of the Dharma life, 5 aspects of the spiritual path. And we've been telling stories each week to kind of explore them, go into them in more detail. And so we've gone right the way through all these aspects. And last week, Satyajoti started to talk about receptivity, the idea of spiritual receptivity. And we heard the story of the return journey from the White Lotus Sutra. And this evening, for this final talk, Satyajoti and I are going to do a joint talk. We're going to both talk about this area of receptivity.
Not at the same time.
Not at the same time? Well, one after the other, and then another one again. Anyway, it's a bit, it'll happen, it'll unfold. And we'll be receptive to each other. So, I'm going to tell a story, because this is a brief story, because the theme is stories of the past. So just a brief story to illustrate why receptivity is really important. And the story is a Zen story about a professor who wants to receive a teaching from a Zen monk. And he visits a Zen monk, and he really, really wants to know an important high teaching, a spiritual teaching. And he visits the monk and requests a teaching. And there's a lot of ceremony and ritual in Zen Buddhism. So the Zen monk gets out 2 teacups and starts to boil some tea, make some tea. And then he gets the pot of tea and he starts to pour a cup of tea for himself, and he starts to pour a cup of tea for the professor. But what happens is he pours a cup of tea for the professor, but then he carries on pouring, he doesn't stop pouring, and the cup gets fuller and fuller and fuller, and then it starts to overflow, and then it starts to spill out all over the table and all over the floor, and the professor goes, stop, what are you doing? And the monk said, well, you are like this cup of tea. You're full, you're already full, there's no space for the Dharma, there's no space for new teachings. So, there can be a problem in the spiritual life when we are already full up and there isn't any space for anything new to emerge. So this quality of receptivity is really, really crucial for change to happen, for growth to happen, for wisdom to happen. But there needs to be receptivity. And the problem can be if we're already full of our own ideas about the world, our own stories about the world, our own views about the world, we can't really see through that or past that. It's like a kind of bubble that we're in, or a fog that surrounds us wherever we go. We can't see a perspective outside of that. So we need receptivity in order to kind of break through this kind of shell, this kind of break through, pierce this bubble that we're in, and allow something new to emerge. So that's what we're going to look at this evening. And Satyajoti drew out last week how receptivity is important with each of these other aspects. You can see how receptivity is key for all the other aspects. So when we look at integration, you could say that we need to be receptive to the bits of ourselves that we're currently unaware of. We need to be watching out for them, listening out for them. We need to be looking for them. We need to be curious. We need to be receptive to learn more about ourselves and see ourselves more fully, more accurately, more deeply. So there's receptivity to the bits of ourselves that are currently below the surface, currently unconscious. And then with positive emotion, we need to learn to become receptive to other people, not our idea of what other people are, but actually the mystery of other people. We need to become receptive to other people's needs, to who they actually are. And so in the Metta Bhavana, it's becoming curious about and receptive to what is this other person, who is this other person, and what do they actually need, rather than my idea of them. And so there's receptivity involved in positive emotion. It's getting outside of this kind of obsession, focus on ourselves, and starting to look past that and beyond that to other people, focusing on other people. Then with spiritual depth, we need to be receptive to new teachings, new ideas, new ways of thinking, like the story with the Zen cup. And then we need to be also receptive to just the direct experience, the bare experience of reality itself, the kind of direct experience of the truth. So we need to be receptive for wisdom to emerge. We need to be receptive to the truth, to new teachings, and to reality itself. And then with spiritual rebirth, we need to allow new qualities to unfold and to emerge. So we need to have gaps and pauses and spaces where new things can bubble through. I'll talk about that in a little while. But we also need to be, we need to be receptive to what's highest in us and what's highest in the universe. And so that's this element of spiritual rebirth involves that type of receptivity, being receptive to what's highest in the universe, and also, allowing pauses and gaps so that new qualities can emerge, being receptive to new qualities, allowing them to grow, to emerge, to develop. So I want to just draw out 3 separate aspects of receptivity before I hand over to Satyajyoti. And those 3 aspects of receptivity are, first of all, that we need to have gaps in our life where we do absolutely nothing. We need to have space in our life where we're free from the busyness and the constant drive to be doing something all the time, constantly active, constantly doing something. And our bodies can be like this, we're constantly doing tasks, performing tasks, trying to get things done. But our minds are also like this, constantly thinking, constantly doing, constantly trying to make things happen. So, it's as though, the way I relate to this is, it's like when you've eaten food, you need to stop and pause and just allow the food to be digested. And it's the same with our experience. We need to just have gaps in our lives, pauses in our life where we can just digest our experiences. And it's interesting, it's in those gaps and spaces that when we're not really trying, actually breakthroughs can happen, new things can bubble up. So, there can be a problem in the spiritual life if it's always me trying to make it happen, me striving to make it happen. And so we need to break that habit really by just having time where we're not trying to do anything actually, we're just literally not trying to do anything, which can be actually really, really difficult, just to try and sit still for 5 minutes, half an hour, and not try to do anything. It just can be really uncomfortable actually. And there's a famous poem, or you may have heard of it, apparently some people studied this at school. There's a poem called Leisure, and the first 2 lines are something like, "What is this life? I've forgotten it. If full of care, we have no time to stop and stare." Very good. So it's a very famous poem. What is this life? If full of care, we have no time to stop, to stand and stare. And it really captures this attitude of receptivity actually. If we're so busy, so full of care for what needs to be done, what is our life if we've no time to just stop and stare, just to take things in, to kind of take in beauty, take in what's around us, take in our experience. We need to have those gaps, those pauses in our life where we can take in something new, where we can stop and stare, just be open, be receptive. And it's curious, there's often the times when you're really trying to think of something and you've forgotten it, you're really trying to think like I was then. You just can't remember, it gets more and more further away from you. But then when you stop and you're doing something else, it's there, it's available. So it's in those times when we stop trying and we stop trying to make something happen. Obviously, often it's in those times where something does happen, where something bubbles up. We digest our experience, something new can emerge. So we need to create gaps in our experience. And then the second thing I want to draw out about receptivity is related to this Zen story of being full. If we're too full of our own ideas, our own thoughts, our own experiences, our own importance, we're not really open to the wisdom and the experience of other people, the teachings that we can receive from other people, their wisdom and their experience. If we're kind of already full of our own ideas, our own importance, our own experience. So we need to be open to, receptive to Dharma teachings, the truth of Dharma teachings, but also the experience of people who can teach us, can give those teachings to us, who can share their experience with us. And then thirdly, the third aspect that I want to draw out in relation to receptivity is that we can be receptive, we need to be receptive and cultivate receptivity to what's highest in us and what's highest in the universe. And it's said that there is a part of us that will resonate with what's highest in the universe. What's best in us will resonate, what's highest in us will resonate and recognise what's highest in the universe. So sometimes we call this our higher self, but sometimes it also can be experienced as though there's something higher outside of us, something higher in the universe that we can be receptive and open to. And this was drawn out very well by the parable last week from the White Lotus Sutra. It's that the son in the story was being called and being kind of brought along by the father in the story, which represents the Buddha or or higher self, you might say. So we need to be, it's often, again, when we're busy, when we're full, we can't hear that voice. It's very, very subtle, very, very quiet. The bit of us that knows what's right, the bit of us that knows what to do, it gets drowned out by all the other demands, all the other things going on in our life and in our mind. But we need to be receptive to what's highest in us and what's highest in the universe. And we can cultivate that in different ways. And the faculty that I'm talking about here is called Shraddha, the faculty of Shraddha in Buddhism. It's a faculty that within us knows what's true, knows what's highest, and resonates, responds to it. And we can cultivate that, a response to what's highest, to what's beautiful. And these three aspects, I think, are particularly important in our culture, because in our culture, we're really driven, we're really kind of pushed to be very, very busy all the time, to be doing something all the time, and working life makes that difficult to avoid, the way our working lives are set up. And there's a kind of real message in our society, just we must be doing all the time, we must be really busy all the time. So it's important to counteract that with gaps and spaces and pauses, this first aspect of receptivity. And also there's a kind of conditioning or message where we need to be independent, we need to be our own person, we don't not have help from other people. So that, we need to counter that, we need to be open to help from other people, to other people's experience and wisdom and teachings. And also there can be a conditioning, a view in our society, well, there isn't anything higher, there's nothing higher, there's just, all there is matter. It's a kind of materialistic, nihilistic view. And it can be, we need to counter that with a sense of, well, we can be open to higher forces within us, within the universe. We can be open and receptive to what's highest in the universe. So yeah, they're the three aspects I wanted to draw out in this little introduction. And then now Satyajyoti and I, for the rest of the evening, we will share kind of personal stories with you of our own experiences of working with receptivity.
Okay, so when I was reflecting on my own personal experiences of receptivity, the first what came to mind is actually, I think receptivity is when I get myself out of the way. That's what it is. It's when I get that kind of self-obsession out of the way. And I can be receptive to lots of different things, to other people, to the environment I'm in, and to myself as well. It's interesting that almost I can get in the way of my own self, which is a bit bizarre, but it's a bit like somehow that can happen. And as I become more receptive, it seems that receptivity turns into something like a deeper responsiveness, a deeper receptivity to the beautiful and to truth, Shraddha, which Bodhinaga was just talking about. So that's that kind of feeling we get when we're caught up in something. So if we see a sunset and we find it beautiful, it's an immediate response. Okay, it's not that's a very interesting sunset. I'll think about it and find it beautiful. Do you see what I mean? It's just like you go towards it. It draws you in. It draws you in. And if you watch a really good film, it draws you in. So receptivity can feel like we're taken out of ourselves, like we're transported. And we can really develop this sense of receptivity. We can also feel receptive, that sense you get when you're in communication with a good friend. And it's a bit like you and the good friend, kind of the differences between you disappear. And it's like this really strong sense of communication between you. So I'll talk specifically about two areas of my practice of receptivity, I suppose. So the first is a Dharma teaching that really spoke to me. And it really spoke to me. It did that thing where it just drew me. It's like I didn't have to think about it. I just was drawn to it. It transported me, I suppose. And it was actually from the Four Noble Truths. So it was the first of the Four Noble Truths, that there is suffering. And it's kind of bizarre in a way that, that there is suffering should have had this response in me. But as whoever it was that told me this, first of all, was exploring it and talking about the different kinds of suffering there are, the fact that there's just existential suffering, or dukkha, unsatisfactoriness, and that when you are happy, well, often then you have the fear of losing that happiness as well. So what it did to me is when I heard that teaching, that there is suffering in the world, is I had a response of relief. Because I think up until then, I had on some level thought that if only I organised my life right, I would be happy. And that it was therefore my fault if I was unhappy. So that if only I got the right job, the right career, I suppose, the right place to live, the right friends, the right relationship, the right holidays, the right political systems, if only I got all those things sorted out, then I would be happy. And if I couldn't get them sorted out, it was a fault in me. And I actually think that is something kind of part of, I suppose, the capitalist story is the fault is in me, because then I'm more likely to go out and try and buy things that will make me feel better. Yeah? It's like, marketing, you look for a problem. If you've got a product, even if there isn't a problem already, you look for the problem, persuade people they've got that problem, and then sell them the thing that you're trying to sell. And I think there's an extent to which this idea that, happiness is my due, it's like a certain kind of happiness is my due, if only I get it right, was really actually a source of suffering to me. It's like, if only I could get that right. So that teaching, it really changed my life, I suppose, because it really turned things around. It was no longer, it's my fault that I can't be happy. It was much more, okay, let's work with Buddhist teachings, let's explore them a bit more. And I have to say, the next three noble truths, which is there's a cause of suffering, which is craving, there's a way out of suffering, and there's the Noble Eightfold Path, which will lead us from suffering. I had to kind of take those a bit more on faith, because I really wasn't sure. I wasn't really sure, is craving? I didn't have that same natural response to it. But probably, maybe when I'd been practicing for a few years, I found myself on a retreat where there was a lot of silence, like loads of silence, days and days of silence. And I found that the Four Noble Truths were coming to my mind, and I realised that I just really wanted to explore them. So I'd go for walks and I'd just kind of say them to myself, just kind of trying to get, what do these mean to me? I know they're Buddhist teachings. I mean, by then I was a mitra, I'd asked for ordination, but it was a bit like, but what do I really think about these? So I really reflected on them in the silence. And because there was so much space and had lots of time just to stand and stare, I was able to let them just kind of almost go through my being. It was a bit like I could physically spend time with them and make them my own. And I won't go into them because in a way then I'd start giving a talk about the Four Noble Truths. But it was a bit like I could kind of really test it out for myself and see, do I really believe this? In my experience, does this work for me? And I think that kind of testing it out reflects three different ways that we can understand Buddhist teaching, the Dharma. We can listen, so you can listen in a talk like this. You can reflect, which is what I was doing, and then you can meditate as well, where they really become a part of you. So it's a bit like we hear a lot of teachings, we need to have time to reflect on them, and we need to meditate on them. It's a bit like they need to kind of go from our head to being in our very marrow of our bones, so that we actually really live them. And I don't think I am there with the Four Noble Truths yet at all, but I can feel that process of much more exploring them and much more being receptive to the ideas behind them. Okay, and then I suppose the second area in which I wanted to talk today about receptivity was around receptivity in meditation. And I think, again, that's really changed my approach to meditation, or my experience of meditation. So I think when I first started to meditate, I was quite a rule follower, and quite hard in my practice. So I'd go in breath out, breath one, in breath out, breath two, and a kind of real following. This is the rules, and this is how I should do it. And not so much with the metta, but certainly a bit with the metta as well, a kind of like a forcing my experience onto what was going on. And I think when we start meditating, often we need to do that, because there's a lot to learn, and it's a bit like we need to start with the sense of actually just developing our mind, I suppose, which you are doing in meditation. But as time has gone on, I've become much more receptive. So the way that works out is that in the mindfulness of breathing, well, there's an idea about the breath, and then there's the actual experience in your body of the breath. So, and those two are very different things. So there's an idea of breathing that we can have. My breath is like this, that we can bring our attention to. Or there's the actual experiences in my body, which are often just very little twinges, very little sensations. And when I rest in those, it's a very different experience to meditate. In fact, a lot more pleasure will arise. And it feels that as that pleasure arises, it draws me in the way that I was talking about the sunset will draw you in. It's a bit like I'm much more responsive. I'm much more receptive to what is actually happening. And somehow this sense of me is lost. I'm much more just in the sensations of breathing, in this very pleasurable experience of breathing. So there's a receptivity there. There's just being with what's happening. And I think in order to get to that situation, just like Bodhinaga said, well, I need time to do nothing. I need time to do nothing. Because if I sit down, you know, I've got a full day ahead, I've got a to-do list. First thing on the to-do list, meditate. You know, my poor old mind has not had time to digest, to think about my life. So as soon as I start meditating, well, of course it's going to do that. It's going to have to do that because it's the only time it's got to do it. So my mind will be full of hindrances. So if I can have a little bit of time where I'm not doing anything before I meditate, that can really help. And actually changing the conditions of my life. So I used to find meditating really hard. And I used to sit down in the morning, it used to feel like an anxiety bhavana, because I was just, you know, all those things I needed to do that day were going through my head and I was getting more anxious. And there seemed very little point in doing it. And I had a big full-time job, lots of responsibility, all that kind of stuff. And I decided if I'm going to be able to meditate, I'm going to have work part-time hours. That's just the only thing that I'm going to have to do. So I changed my working conditions so that I would have more time to be receptive. It's interesting how the whole thing of busyness that Bodhinaga talked about then filled it up and still continues to fill it up. You know, it's a bit like, these days I do have more control over my time, but it is so hard to get away from that busy thing all the time. You know, the whole thing about if you say to someone, how are you? And they go, oh, busy, that means good. Yeah, you know, and if you said, oh no, I haven't really got much on at the moment, they might go, oh, what's wrong with you? You know, get something, do something, you know. And I think it's like very hard for me to kind of counteract that really, and to give myself the time. When I go on retreat, it's a great thing because it means that the time is created for me. It's like, you know, I just fit in the structure and there is time then to go for walks, to sit in an armchair and just to do nothing, literally to do nothing. I was listening to a talk this morning, actually, and Sangharashta, the founder of Triratna, when he talked about doing nothing, he said, you sit in a chair and you literally do nothing. You know, it's not like you plan anything. It's not like you think things through. You sit there, and maybe you look at something just to kind of give yourself something to do, but the idea is you literally do nothing. And he says you need to build it up. Start with 5 minutes and work up to half an hour if you can. And as I understand it, he does a lot of that. Well, he's very old now, but before that he would make time in his, you know, he's creating a whole Buddhist movement, but he made time to do nothing. If you're able to come on Saturday when Ratnaguna comes to talk, he also is part of his life where he just makes sure that he does nothing. And you can see the results, actually. You know, you can see in a person when they do make that time that it allows for a kind of creativity to arise. So, so that's with the mindfulness of breathing and receptivity. And with metta as well, I think I've become much more receptive to how I really am. So, you know, we spend a lot of time at the beginning of meditation with the body awareness, the body scan. We try to give time for that as well. That's really important because that's where we can learn how we really are. And then I can bring metta to myself as I really am, whether I'm happy that day or whether I'm sad, whether I'm, you know, judging myself to be good or judging myself to be bad. It doesn't really matter how I am. The important thing is I'm receptive to it and I bring metta to my reality of how I am. And I think that's a very different experience from when I sit down and go, I will be happy, you know, may I be happy. It's kind of like I'm actually meeting the kind of, there's like, I suppose, a tenderness, a kind of, a receptivity to what is really going on for me. And from that, I can feel that metta can really flow, wishing myself well will flow naturally, rather than it being something I'm trying to sort of pump up. Yeah, but it's like something that will flow. I've probably said it before, but there's a metaphor that is in the Wild Mind book, which is a great book about meditating by Bodhipatcha. And he uses the metaphor of, if you want to see all the little animals in the woods, you don't go charging about. You just sit down and you wait for the little animals to come out. You know, you'll soon start to hear all their little rustlings, but you need to be still for that to happen. And I think that's what receptivity is about. It's like we need to be still so that we can allow our meditation to happen or our relationships with other people to happen. Yeah, so then I'll just briefly say a little bit about just sitting, So we do, what we do here, as you know, is we'll usually have a little bit of just sitting at the end of a meditation. We do that on the newcomers course, and we usually do it at Sangha night as well. But I just really encourage, if the person who's leading the meditation doesn't do the just sitting at the end, give yourself some time to just sit, because I think that space between standing up off the cushion and going back into life is quite a tender one. And I think it's really important just to give yourself a few minutes of just being, of absorbing, of digesting your experience before you go back into life. Okay, so I think that is what I'm going to say. Yeah, and I also was going to give a really big thing about we need to do nothing, but I think Bodhinaga said that very well, so finish there.
I find Ratnaguna, who actually does make a practice of doing nothing. He's the guy who's coming, very experienced order member who's coming to do a day on Saturday. And I heard him talk about this and describe this and say, well, people ask him, well, what are you doing on Wednesday? And I say, well, I'm doing nothing, not doing anything. He said, oh, great, can we meet up? And he said, no, I'm not doing anything. And I'd be quite puzzled and say, well, can we meet up then? He said, no, I'm not doing anything. So he just puts in his diary, doing nothing. Blocks out times in his diary where he's doing nothing. And I find that quite radical. But also at the start of meditation, just find it a real gift as well. I've been on some retreats with an older member called Vasantra, and he starts his led meditations by saying, okay, now we'll just start by doing nothing. You could do, you don't have to do anything, you don't have to meditate, you don't have to do anything. I feel that. And it feels quite, part of me just relaxes, well, I don't have to do anything. It seems like really radical, a real gift. So I recommend that as a way of starting meditation. Just have a few minutes where you just allow yourself a holiday. He calls it a holiday. You don't have to do anything. And it creates a much gentler, much more responsive, more receptive way into starting meditation. You're starting from a very different place, I find. So I'm going to tell a story about unreceptiveness. My own unreceptiveness. It's a little embarrassing. And it's this second aspect of receptivity, especially being receptive to people with more experience and more wisdom than I have. It's something I'm still learning. It's something I'm still learning about. But when I started to work on the centre team, which was 5 years ago now, it's gone very quickly. But 5 years ago, I started to work on the centre team, alongside some very experienced people with a lot of wisdom, a lot of experience and skills with teaching the Dharma, communicating the Dharma. And we used to have meetings. We still do have meetings, but we had meetings to plan Sangha night and come up with the ideas for themes and talks. And the meetings weren't going particularly well because I was very inflated with my sense of how good my ideas were and how important they were, how important I was. And the meetings were very kind of bumpy and clunky because I was insisting that people should go along with my ideas and kind of take my ideas very seriously and kind of listen to them. And I wasn't really receptive to the fact, well, there were people in the team who've got, decades of experience of planning Sangha nights, and they basically knew what they were talking about, and I didn't really. And that was the truth, but I couldn't see that. I just thought, well, my ideas are great. Why don't they see that? Why don't they think they're great? And it was, it made for quite a tension. And I would just push more and more to have my ideas heard and listened to. And the more I seemed to push, the less they got listened to. It was quite painful, actually. It created a real tension where me and Vidanya especially actually just kind of would clash. We just couldn't kind of, we couldn't communicate effectively in a way. I was convinced it wasn't my fault. I was convinced that it's because I wasn't being heard, I wasn't being listened to. My ideas were really great, and why weren't they listening to them? And Padma Vajra, who was here a couple of weeks ago, he's the president of our centre. He comes and listens to lots of people offload about their own stuff, about different things in the centre, and also great things in the centre. And he kind of absorbs it all and collects it all as a president. And I met with him around this time and just told him about my woes, my difficulties, about how I wasn't being listened to, my ideas should be listened to, and I felt like I wasn't being heard. And what I expected was Padmavajra to back me up actually and say, yeah, they're terrible, aren't they? They should be listening to you. I know what they're like. They're really bad. They should be listening to you, and I'll have a word with them. I'll sort them out for you. That was what I was expecting Padmavajra to say to me. And what he said to me, I can still remember it. Kind of shook me. I was driving him back to the Buddhist Centre. I don't know where we'd been, and I was talking to him about it. And he said to me, "Well, I think you should try serving Vidanya and Suryamati." And it just kind of shook me to my core. This idea that you should try serving Vidanya and Suryamati. Just ask them what help they need. Ask them if they need help, and just serve them. And it really pricked my ego, because it was the opposite of what I wanted to hear and what I wanted to do. It's in fact the last thing that I wanted to do. It was almost like there's a kind of inner revulsion. I thought, I can't do that. I don't think I can do that. And then at the same time, I thought, that's what I need to do, isn't it? This is exactly what I need to do, isn't it? He's right. And then, no, he's right, isn't he? This is what I need to do. I need to serve them. And then, it was. I think basically, in a sense, I can't help but be receptive to Padmavajra. There's something about him that I can't help but be receptive to him. And at the same time, so he was able to kind of make a chink into this kind of particular bubble that I was in, kind of self-obsessed bubble. He was able to kind of make a chink in it, and for light to shine through. And all of a sudden, I could see the solution. I could see the answer to the problem wasn't that the other people were all to blame and being really nasty. It was that I needed to change my stance and my attitude and be receptive actually to the years and years of experience, and to try and learn how to give better Dharma talks, how to plan Dharma talks, how to plan Sangha nights, just to kind of learn from all of those years of experience. And it was what happened as a result of that teaching was, I relaxed quite a lot actually. I was quite tense around that time. People noticed that, and afterwards people seemed to notice a change in me. I just seemed to be more relaxed, more kind of, there seemed to be something different about me which people noticed. And funnily enough, once I stopped pushing for my ideas to be listened to, Vidanya became really interested in what I thought about Sangha night and Sangha night planning. It was the opposite of what it's kind of counterintuitive. I thought I just need to shout louder and push harder, and then I'll be heard. And actually, when I stopped doing that, I was actually asked, more and more. Vidanya wanted to know, and it really surprised me. Actually, really shocked me I could just really see what I'd contributed to that situation. And when I changed my stance, the whole situation dissolved. Actually, all the tension dissolved. And I started to see Vidanya's qualities. I think before that, I just was completely in this self-obsessed bubble, and I couldn't see his qualities. I couldn't see, I just was blind to how great a Dharma teacher he was, how much he knew about the Dharma, how experienced he was. Actually, how kind he is as well. Actually, what a kind of warm and kind friend he is. I'd kind of been blind to all of that, and that all changed. All of a night, what started to blossom was this really warm friendship between the two of us. At the time, like a year later, we looked back and both admitted, our friendship wasn't in a good place. Our relationship wasn't in that good a place. But then all of a sudden, I'd changed this. I'd taken on board this teaching from Padmavajra, and the whole thing just turned around, and we've got just a really strong friendship now. I can really see Vidanya's qualities and his remarkable qualities. Actually, what he's able to do, what he's achieved here in Sheffield, and throughout our movement with his Dharma teaching, and how silly it was actually to try and not to want to learn from that, not to want to learn from his experience. So I started to think more in terms of serving Vidanya and helping him, serving him in this situation, and serving Suryamati, who was working really, really hard as the chair of this centre. And then it became more, okay, well, what I'm doing is I'm serving this situation, I'm serving the Sangha in Sheffield, I'm serving the people who come to the Buddhist Centre, I'm serving this project of building Dharma, building the Sangha, communicating the Dharma. So it became more, I'm serving this situation. And that started to open up into more, well, actually, I'm not just serving Vidyanya's vision and his ideas. There's something. It's like, well, Vidyanya's serving something. He's serving something bigger than him. And so this might sound strange, but it's the experience when people who created this centre, got this centre, acquired this centre, set up this sangha, talk about that experience. They describe it as though it's as if something was trying to create a sangha and a Buddhist centre through them. It's as though they're kind of an eclectic bunch of order members just trying their best, and they end up, how they look back and say, well, like Vidanya and Mogavangsa, they look back and say, well, how did this happen? How did we get this building? There was just a small bunch of us trying to do our best, a very eclectic bunch of us. How did this happen? And their experience is that, well, there was something trying to express the Dharma through them, something trying to make this happen, and that they see themselves as serving, and I now see myself as serving. So this kind of connects to this third aspect of receptivity, being receptive to, in a sense, the Dharma, what's highest in the universe, and having a sense of serving that, allowing that to, doing what I can to enable that to unfold, to be expressed in Sheffield, to affect people in Sheffield. And that is really, found that really, really inspiring now, rather than it being kind of my ego project, me trying to get my ideas heard. Now I'm just trying to get myself out of the way more and more, so that this magical project keeps growing and developing and unfolding, and people keep being changed and transformed by it. So it's just, much more, so that the teaching I received was to serve initially Vidanya and Suryamati, but now, well, the Sangha in Sheffield and the Dharma, the three jewels, really. That was my teaching, and so it was, I went from a position of being completely unreceptive to people's, other people's experience and wisdom, and received a teaching which kind of pierced through that bubble and opened up receptivity, and then kind of completely changed my perspective to one of just serving other people, serving this situation.